And we're gonna start things off with my favorite topic, cryptids, with the Flatwoods Monster. The initial report of this creature is incredibly odd. This is not like most cryptids you hear about. The incident occurred on the night of September 12th, 1952, when 6 youths were playing a football game which was suddenly interrupted when the sky was lit up by a bright fireball-looking object that plummeted towards the earth, landing in a hillside. The boys, joined by a local woman by the name of Kathleen May, went to investigate. When they got to the hill, there was suddenly another burst of bright light. They turned to look in the direction of it and saw what was soon deemed to be the Flatwoods Monster. It looked to be about 12 feet tall. It was Christmassy because it had a red face and wore bright green clothing. Most odd though was that its head was shaped like the ace of spades, and it was floating in midair towards the group. The creature was never seen again, but everyone in the group swore up and down that they saw what they saw. Was it an alien, a ghost, some other bizarre creature, a mix of all three? Perhaps one day it'll come back to interrupt another game of nighttime football, but for now, the Flatwoods Monster lives on in the hearts of many West Virginia locals in the form of legend. Next up we have Ugua. Ugua is an elusive creature which is said to roam the Monongalia River of West Virginia and Pennsylvania. Native tribes were familiar with this aquatic creature, warning European settlers of its presence. Described as a large aquatic beast, Ugua was known for its ability to snatch victims from the water's edge with its powerful jaws and drag them beneath the river's surface, where it would drown and store them in its den later. If you think you're safe as long as you don't get too close to the water, not quite the case. Ugua can also survive on land. With 4 stubby legs instead of fins or flippers, it can swiftly strike at prey on the shore and chase them down if it really needs to. Stories often recounted the creature's reddish-brown, turtle-like appearance, measuring nearly 20 feet in length and weighing approximately 500 pounds. Its long, thick tail left deep slide marks in the earth as it dragged its victims back into the water. Some researchers speculate that Ugua legends may have originated from a rogue alligator that ventured into the river through the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. Other people say that an oversized alligator or snapping turtle might be the culprit. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston. It operated from 1864 to 1994 before finally being shut down, and most of the buildings on the property are prohibited for visitors. They're structurally unsound and unmaintained, but other parts of the facility are open for ghost tours, ghost hunts, and even overnight stays. As with many facilities like this back in the day, the practices taking place were cruel and inhumane. Mental health was not dealt with anywhere close to, how it is now, and the place had only been built to house 250 patients, but at one point there were closer to 2,400 patients at the facility. That is some pretty severe overcrowding, and overcrowding in combination with already poor treatment of patients, can only imagine what kind of hell these people were going through. And it's for this reason that the now abandoned asylum is believed to be haunted, with the spirits of the patients still trapped within its walls. Number 7, the Sodder children disappearance. On Christmas Eve of 1945, there was a terrible fire at the Sodder family home. The parents, 2 Italian immigrants, George and Jenny, and 4 of their 9 children managed to escape, but the other 5 perished in the fire. Or did they? The thing is, their bodies were never found. Now, if there were just 1 or 2 who weren't found, okay, maybe they got a little extra crispy, just turned to dust. But none of them turning up, that's pretty odd, and this was a big part of the reason that the parents believed that they were still alive. They also didn't agree with authorities when they said the fire had started from an electrical issue. George attested to the fact that the home was just recently rewired and inspected, so if the 5 young family members hadn't died in the fire, then where were they? George and Jenny believed that they had possibly been kidnapped and that the fire was arson, with the perpetrators being members of the Sicilian Mafia. George had been very outspoken about his criticism of the fascist government of Italy. Number 6, we have the Eaton Tunnel. The Eaton Tunnel in West Virginia, also known as the Lost Tunnel, is said to be haunted. Built as part of the Parkersburg branch of the Northwestern Virginia Railroad in 1857. This tunnel, along with 22 others, witnessed the loss of a number of lives during its construction. Reports of haunting experiences in and around the Eaton Tunnel include eerie eerie incidents that date back to its construction. In 1854, a man met his demise when rocks fell on him while building the tunnel. In 1855, Terry Duffy tragically lost his life when a rope carrying rocks accidentally caught him and sent him plummeting 125 feet down the shaft. The tunnel's dark history continued in 1865 when a rock fell, claimed the lives of 3 men and seriously injured a woman. Cholera swept through the nearby mining camp in 1866, leading to the deaths of 15 people in just 4 days. Rock falls in 1867 and 1875 claimed the lives of multiple workers. And train accidents in 1877, 1890, and 1907 resulted in even more fatalities. So numerous tragedies are associated with the Eaton Tunnel, so it comes to no surprise that people have reported hearing ghostly voices from deep within it. Some have claimed to hear the soft voice of a woman pleading for help. Others have heard the chatter of men as though they were a group of laborers working inside the tunnel. Next up is the haunted West Virginia Penitentiary, said to be one of the most haunted prisons in the United States, if not the world. It operated from 1876 until its closure in 1995. The prison has a long history of violence, brutality, and death. The overcrowded and unsanitary conditions gave rise to a multitude of violent incidents, riots, deadly clashes among inmates. Then you have the electric chair. In its earlier days, public hangings were also conducted within the prison. So given the grim history of violence and death at this Gothic-style prison, a number of reports of paranormal activity have surfaced over the years. The building, which is still standing today, offers ghost tours to visitors and investigators, and many have reported unsettling experiences during their visits. At our number 4 spot, we have the case of Mamie Thurman. On June 22nd, 1932, the body of a woman was found in a blackberry bush on 22 Mine Road near Holden by a young boy. Her throat had been slashed and there were 2 gunshot wounds in her head. It seemed that the motive here was personal, and it wasn't just the brutality of the attack either. Robbery had been ruled out as she had expensive jewelry on her. So, who did it and why? Well, 2 suspects were arrested: Harry Robertson, Mamie and her husband's landlord, and Charles Stevenson, Harry's handyman, who also lived in the same house. Stevenson ended up taking the blame for the crime, but this was highly suspect. What was his motive? It was Harry Robertson, who had been having an affair with Thurman, and not only that, but she was also known to have been seeing about a dozen other prominent and powerful men on the side as well. Could they have somehow been involved? Till this day, the case is still murky. Number 3, the Dingus Tunnel. One of the few ways to reach the small remote town of Dingus in Mingo County. 2 hilarious names, Dingus, Mingo County. Anyway, the only way to really access this small town is through the Dingus Tunnel, a mile-long, single-lane tunnel that is said to be haunted. The town of Dingus was pretty lawless back in the day. A large part of the violence came from the fact that the locals did not like outsiders, primarily those that didn't look like them. African Americans and Chinese immigrants coming through the tunnel would often come face to face with angry locals at the other end, brandishing guns, looking to keep them out. Now, aside from the violent and dark history here, the tunnel's also seen a large number of accidents throughout its history. It's just dangerous. The tunnel is narrow, dark, and once again, only 1 lane, so collisions have been known to happen. You probably all know where this is going by now. Yes, we have another supposedly haunted tunnel on our hands. People have heard disembodied voices coming from its depths, full-on apparitions, and if ghosts do exist, with all the dark stuff that's happened here over the years, it makes sense that this would be a hotspot for them. In at number 2 is Mothman, a true star of the cryptid community. If there was a Mount Rushmore of cryptids, Mothman would be right there with Nessie, Bigfoot, and the Chupacabra. The legend began in November of 1966 when several residents reported seeing a strange human-sized creature with large wings, fiery red eyes, and a moth-like appearance. Witnesses claimed that this creature could fly at high speeds and emitted a high-pitched, eerie screech. The sightings of Mothman were accompanied by various reports of unexplained phenomena, including electrical disturbances, strange lights in the sky, and eerie encounters with the creature. The events culminated in the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in December of 1967, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. Some associate associated Mothman sightings with this disaster, that perhaps the creature was some sort of harbinger of doom. Finally, we have the legend of Screaming Jenny. The railroad tracks in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia are said to be haunted by the tortured spirit of Screaming Jenny. At some point in the mid-19th century, shortly after the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was built, the storage sheds along the tracks were abandoned, and these sheds became the perfect shelter for homeless residents of the area, one of which was Jenny. Jenny didn't have much. That's why she was living in a shed next to some train tracks after all. She did odd jobs here and there to help sustain herself, but at night all she had was her small fireplace and whatever little amount of food she could afford. One night she was drinking some soup, shivering over her fire, when a spark landed on her clothes, slowly setting them on fire. Jenny was too tired and cold to notice though, until the fire burnt through to her skin, and she immediately stood up and began doing what a Screaming Jenny does best: scream. She ran from her shed yelling for help and was too busy being on fire to notice the lights of a train heading straight for her. It's said that one night, about a month after Jenny's death, a train driver was passing by the same area of track where she had died. He saw a figure writhing on fire in the middle of the track. He couldn't stop the train in time, but ran back to the area once he was able to stop to okay or help them the best way he could, but there was nothing there. To this day, especially on cold autumn nights, some residents claim to hear the ghostly screams of Jenny coming from the tracks.
In our number 10 spot, we have Roanoke, West Virginia. In a place called Roanoke in West Virginia, there is a legend that has pretty much scared the crap out of the married men in that town. What is this legend? Well, as the story goes, apparently in 1902, over the course of a week, many married men came across a woman in black, and this woman followed these men back to their homes and then disappeared when they got inside. In some of the stories around this woman, it is said that she did this due to the men being unfaithful, and some of the stories say that it was to prove that the men would be unfaithful. All of these men were of different backgrounds and social statuses. All they had in common was that they were married, and they all had described the same event. Apparently though, after a week, the woman was gone from this town. But then in a town nearby, there were reports of seeing her. In our number 9 spot, we have the Peyton Randolph House. The Peyton Randolph House is located in Williamsburg. So many mysterious things seemingly happen here, and people believe it to be as a result of all of the death that has occurred there. The legend goes that an unnamed female slave cursed the house before she died, and since then there have been too many deaths to count, from a Civil War soldier to a young boy who fell out of a tree to a young girl who fell from a window to 2 men who were fatally hurt during a fight. People believe the property to have a poltergeist, and there have been many reports of ghostly laughing, singing, glass breaking, people being touched, pushed, and even a security guard has said he was held down with extreme force. Yeah, best not to visit this place just to be safe. In our number 8 spot, we have the cursed tree. In Jamestown, there is a legend of a cursed tree. Apparently there once was a girl named Sarah Harrison who was engaged, but then broke off her engagement when she met a man named James Blair, whom she then ended up marrying. This upset her parents very much so, because he did not come from much money and he was also much older. When both Sarah and James died shortly after they were married, they were buried together, but not too long after, a strange thing happened. A tree began to grow and the roots separated their graves. People now believe that this was an act by her mother to separate them for eternity, but of course this is just a theory. In our number 7 spot, we have the Avenel House. This is a house in West Virginia that is open to paranormal teams for investigation. That's how haunted it is. There have been many people that have claimed to have captured EVPs in this house, which are electronic voice phenomena. So cool! People have confirmed hearing a cat meowing, seeing an orb that looks like an eye, smelling tobacco when no one's around, feeling dizzy, and hearing many strange noises. People have also reported seeing a phantom lady in white floating down the halls or in the garden with a parasol in her hand. Sounds like a pretty classy ghost. In our number 6 spot, we have Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park has such a dark history that you should only visit it if you have extreme caution and are also looking to be spooked. There were quite a few people that lost their lives while the park was active from 1926 to 1966. In fact, it was because of these deaths that the park gained such a poor reputation and then ended up closing. It has also been said that the park used to be a Native American burial ground, and so it is believed that a lot of ghosts haunt this park because of it. Makes sense. If this ground was once a holy place where bodies were buried, I mean, that is just super sad that it was eventually turned into an amusement park. If I were one of the spirits of these bodies, I would definitely be haunting every person in that park. In our number 5 spot, we have 22 Mine Road. Apparently West Virginia has a haunted road. Damn, West Virginia is seemingly filled with a lot of dark and haunted places. Allegedly in 1932, there was a woman by the name of Mammy Thurman who was killed, and her body was thrown out and left on this road, 22 Mine Road. A man that is said to have been an illiterate handyman was charged with the crime, even though many believed that the real guy that was guilty of the crime was never found. No one quite knows where she was buried, but they say that her ghost haunts this road. In our number 4 spot, we have Shepherdstown. There is a town in West Virginia called Shepherdstown that is supposed to be very haunted. It's an old Civil War town though, so makes sense. Probably every place on this planet that has had a war near it or by it is most likely haunted. Anyways, this town is very known for its ghost tours, which is kind of fun. Many visitors have seen strange phenomena, so they might as well capitalize it. Okay, honestly, I know the title of this video says terrifying, but truly, this one actually seems kind of fun and interesting to visit. I don't know, I'm kinda in the Halloween spirit though, so that might be contributing towards my impression of this town. In our number 3 spot, we have St. Albans Sanatorium in Radford. St. Albans Sanatorium, located in Radford, has a long history of brutality. There once was a horrible massacre there where the Shawnee Indians took the lives of many of the settlers in the 1700s and took the survivors back to their village. A part of the Civil War was also there, so to say that this place has low vibes could be an understatement. The grounds were originally made to be a boys' home in 1892 and specifically for tough, out-of-control boys. Many of the boys ended up taking their own lives on the campus. It was then bought by a doctor who apparently gave very harsh psychiatric treatments in the 1900s. Many people report not only seeing ghosts at this place but also hearing voices, getting touched, etc. Apparently there is a room with a bowling alley, which is kind of fascinating, and anyways, this place is said to have a woman ghost that is forever bowling? I'm just joking, I wish. Well, she is said to be roaming this room, so I bet you she bowls when no one's around. In our number 2 spot, we have the Public Hospital of Williamsburg. The Public Hospital of Williamsburg is now an art museum in West Virginia, and it is one of those places that people say gives you the creeps. It was one of the first mental hospitals in America, and so as you can imagine, many souls have walked through its doors. Apparently, it wasn't kept very well for the patients, and they were also treated pretty badly. People believe that is why it is very much haunted nowadays. At one point, there was supposedly a doctor who was trying to make a change in the hospital for the better and improve the lives of his patients, but then he ended up taking his own life. Many have reported seeing his ghost on the grounds as well as past patient ghosts. A lot of people speak about feeling watched while touring the hospital and that it exudes bad vibes. Well, that's terrifying and possibly a fun Halloween experience all in one. In our number 1 spot, we have the West Virginia State Penitentiary. Well, I saved this one for last because pretty much everyone knows about this famous prison, and I wanted some of the other lesser known locations to shine first. In case you don't know about this prison, this is one of the most brutal prisons that ever existed. It was active between 1876 to 1995, and while it was active, prisoners experienced fatal beatings as well as so much violence and had their life taken by electrocution and hanging. There were many riots inside the prison and many protests outside of the prison to have it shut down due to the inhumane acts against the prisoners. It is said to be extremely haunted by those that lost their lives there.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Greenbrier Ghost. So I know ghost stories are quite a common appearance on top 10, but you're gonna wanna hear me out, I promise you. So Zona Hester was married to a man named Edward, and one day he told their servant to go run some errands, and when the boy returned he found Zona's dead body at the bottom of their stairs. By the time the doctor got there, Edward had carried Zona upstairs, dressed her in a pretty dress and collar, and laid her on the bed. Weird flex, but okay. Sloppily, the doctor didn't really examine her body because she was already dead, but he did see some bruising on her neck, but when he got too close, Edward just lost it and told him to get out. At her funeral, he wouldn't let anyone close to her coffin, and again he hid her neck by tying her favourite scarf around it. Zona's mother Mary Jane knew something was wrong, and she had a strong feeling foul play was involved. She started praying that Zona would come back to her and tell her what happened, and 4 weeks later she did. Back as a ghost, Zona told her how Edward was extremely abusive. That night he thought she hadn't cooked any meat for dinner, so he snapped her neck. Ghost Zona literally turned her head a full 360 degrees exorcist style just to show her mum. Mary Jane then went to the judge and told them everything, and it was enough to get her body exhumed. The new autopsy showed her neck had been broken, her windpipe crushed, and her ligaments were ruptured. Edward was arrested soon after, and it was the first time in history that a testimony from a ghost got a murderer convicted. We all need some more ghost testimonies, honestly. Coming in at number 9 is the Wizard Clip. Weird name, I know, but just go with it. Back in 1794, a man came to the Livingston family home in Middleway asking to lodge there. After being there a few days, the man got very ill, and as his sickness got worse and worse, he called Adam Livingston to his bedside table and told him he was Catholic. Feeling like he was about to die, he asked Adam if he could get a priest for his last rites, but Adam was Lutheran and hated the church. He replied by saying a priest would never enter the doors of his house, and despite begging for a priest, the man died a few days later, and Adam didn't even know his name. Adam felt bad and employed Jacob Foster to sit up with the corpse, and Jacob lit candles in the room, but they went out straight away. He tried again and again, but they went out each time. Freaked out, Jacob left the house immediately, and I really don't blame him. Adam buried the man on his property, and things just went downhill after that. The family started hearing the sound of horses galloping outside their house, but there were no horses around. A while later, his barn burnt to the ground, and half his livestock died, and the other half just disappeared. Inside his home, kitchenware would get thrown around by an invisible force, coins would disappear, but the worst of all was the clipping sound. They could hear a clipping sound at night and would wake up to find half moons and other weird shapes cut into blankets, shoes, clothes, basically everything, and they dubbed that the Wizard Clip. This is what happens when you don't perform a man's last rites, people. He ruins your life. At number 8 we have John Henry. John is a proper folk hero. He worked as a steel driving man, which is basically someone who hammered a steel drill into rock in order to make holes into it to put explosive into that, and then they just blow it up. According to the myth, John was the best man on the job. He was stronger than everyone, more committed, more persistent, he could literally beat anyone. But his true match came when he was up against a steam-powered rock drilling machine. He grabbed 2 hammers and started going at it. They had 35 minutes each, and his workmates were screaming and cheering for him like anything. By the end of it, he had managed to make 2 7-foot holes, whereas the drill had only made 1 9-foot hole, so man had clearly beat machine. John held his hammers up in victory as everyone went wild, but the cheering was so loud the men didn't realize that John was actually about to fall. He fell to the ground, and even though the men rushed to him, it was too late. A blood vessel had burst in his brain, and so that was the end of the greatest driller in the C&O Railroad history. Man won, but I guess machine also won as well. Filling our number 7 slot is the Huntington Hitchhiker. In Huntington on 5th Street Hill, you'll find a young girl late at night waiting for a ride at the top of the hill. It's not every day at night, don't you worry, only when the weather is especially dreary and rainy. Pathetic fallacy much. The first sighting of her was in 1942 when a cab driver picked up a girl wearing a blouse and skirt despite it being freezing outside. She asked to be dropped to the bottom of the hill, and when they got there, the woman was gone. The driver came back to his garage to complain about the incident to his boss when he found out that many other drivers had had the exact same experience. A newspaper article published in 1958 claimed a Huntington couple had brought their daughter and fiancé to get married, but on the drive home the rain was insane and the car turned over and the girl died. So they say the hitchhiking girl is the same one who died in the car crash on her wedding day. Forever trying to get home and start her married life, honestly, who knows. Now at number 6 is the Weeping Woman. There's always a weeping woman or a woman woman in white on all of these lists, I actually expect it now, but either way, the Weeping Woman statue in Parkersburg isn't simply just a statue. Plot twist, who would have guessed? Located in Riverview Cemetery, it's said its role is to watch over the Jackson family, who are actually cousins to the Civil War general Stonewall Jackson. Visiting the statue is all well and good, just don't do it on nights where there's a full moon, because according to the myth, that's the time she comes to life. She's said to be a good judge of character, so if she thinks you're doing something you shouldn't be, she's been known to pull hair and rip t-shirts. I mean, she will come for you. Not the worst thing that could happen from a statue entity though, I mean, it could be worse. Women in West Virginia gravitate towards her because many people believe she can grant wishes and that she can make pregnancies more successful. So, a high moral, pregnancy-inducing protective spirit. Got it. Coming in at number 5 are the giants. There are tons of ancient burial mounds all over West Virginia, and you'd be surprised at the number of giants found in them. The first was found in 1774 when Jack Parsons was walking near Cheat River and he saw some bones poking out of the ground. He pulled out what seemed to be a femur, and when he put it next to his own, he realized it was 7 inches bigger. After digging up the whole skeleton, he figured the person would have been at least 8 feet, bordering more. And many more giant skeletons have also been found in the area that locals now dub it Giant Town. Every single account of a skeleton being dug up put the deceased at over 8 feet. That is insane. How are there that many giants? I don't understand. Like, the tallest man in the world was 8'11" in the world, and you're telling me 8-foot people were just walking around chilling near Cheat River? Like, I'm only 5'4", this makes me sad. Filling our number 3 slot is Edith. Hospitals just aren't fun, let's be real, but at River Park Hospital in Huntington, the staff have managed to find fun in situations I would be bricks in. Employees believe the hospital is haunted by a ghost named Edith. Edith Miller was a registered nurse who started working at the hospital in 1923. And I honestly wish I could tell you she died in a really horrific way at the hospital and that's why she haunts it, but that's really not the case. She's literally just there monitoring the system, making sure everything is going smoothly. Employee of the month for life. Pretty much. At times she opens and closes elevator doors when she shouldn't and messes with the lights, but either way, Edith is still harmless. She's never hurt anyone, although people tend to feel cold spots when they're near her. Patients have also heard footsteps of someone walking down the hallway when there's no one there. Come on Edith, that's rookie ghost shit. You can do better than that. She's so integrated into the hospital that during orientation for new employees, they actually prepare you for your first encounter with her. Gotta love Edith, am I right? Now at number 2 is the Bower House, also known as Shady Dell, which you already know isn't a good look. But the Bower House was built by Captain John Bower, and the house was given to his son JT, but when JT died, he left no heirs for the house to go to. The house was empty for decades and is now being turned into a bed and breakfast. Whilst renovations were underway, workers would hear footsteps and whispers around the house, and standing near the family's portrait photos gave everyone a cold, uneasy feeling. Weirdly enough, they even found a pool of blood as well as a trail on one of the interior staircases, and despite him brushing it off and hoping it was rusty water, others thought it was a death omen. Which, I mean, rusty water, death omen, 2 very different things. The portrait of Aunt Lenora is said to follow you around the house, just looking at you wherever you go. But the biggest feature of the house is the Headless Horseman. A Union soldier called Julian Garesh was beheaded during the Battle of Stones River, and his friend's military patch that Julian wore was found as part of the house's artifacts. Many people had seen the man wander the property, but after the patch was removed, Julian too just ceased to take his nightly walks. Or nightly floats. I feel like ghosts float, they don't walk. So his nightly floats. Yeah. And finally, at number 1 is Mothman. Now this creature has been seen around the Point Pleasant area of West Virginia. What happened was that in November of 1966, 5 men were digging a grave at a nearby cemetery when they saw a huge man-like figure fly from the trees above them. A few days later, 2 couples told police they also saw a massive grey creature whose eyes glowed blood red. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. In the upcoming weeks, the reports from people seeing the thing were coming in like crazy. A large bird with red eyes, eyes glowing like bicycle reflectors. No one could figure out what the hell it was that was terrorizing the town. Some thought it was connected to aliens or a supernatural manifestation of some sort. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, whatever it was still an unidentified flying object, so maybe it is a UFO after all. The alien people were right, I guess.
Next up at number 9 now, we have haunted Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is a very picturesque town in West Virginia, full of dozens dozens of 19th century buildings and old shops, restaurants and inns. All of those old buildings though are said to be the reason why this town always makes the list of the most haunted places in America. It was the site of many Civil War battles, and locals say their restless spirits still walk the streets and pass through the old stone walls. Alyssa Lavasseur, manager of the town's museum, once said, "The whole town is haunted. People have seen things. You can probably ask anyone in town who has been living here or works here, and they have seen something. They can't deny it." It may seem like a bold claim, but it seems that it's true. The townspeople are all in agreement that their homes are also home to ghosts. Regular sightings include wounded soldiers, an old priest, and a phantom army troop performing one of their marching drills. Sounds annoying, and you probably can't ask them to keep it down. Next up at number 8 now, we have the unknown stranger. Today, in the town of Middleway, you can visit a grave where the marked name on it is simply the unknown stranger. The story goes way back to 1794. A travelling stranger was staying at a boarding house in Middleway when he fell gravely ill. He called the owner of the board house, Adam Livingston, to his bedside and told him he was Catholic. He begged to be given his last rites by a Catholic priest. Livingston was a Lutheran and knew of no Catholic priest nearby. The stranger begged and begged, but his request would be his last dying breath. In the years since then, locals say the unknown stranger haunts the old boarding house and even the town at large. They say he is a vengeful spirit, unable to pass on because he didn't get the last rites he so desperately wanted. Today, you can go to the grave of the unknown stranger, but some still fear his wrath will return against them. Coming at number 7 now, we have the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This building was a psychiatric hospital that became operational in 1864. For almost 100 years, it took in some of the most troubled and disturbed minds in West Virginia. It was only built to house about 250 patients, but began to take on more than it could handle. By the 1950s, it had reached its peak and housed over 2,400 patients. They were all jammed into these overcrowded and poor conditions. Despite this, the asylum limped on for another 40 years until it was finally closed to patients in 1994. Now, people say it's haunted by the thousands of tortured souls who eked out a miserable existence there in their lives. Those who have dared to visit it report doors slamming, shadowy figures and blood-curdling screams from within the building's crumbling walls. Many locals stay well clear of it, but brave visitors can take special ghost tours right through the asylum where they say things go bump in the night almost every night. Next up at number 6 now, we have the North Bend Rail Trail, Tunnel number 19. That's a mouthful. Tunnel number 19 is also known as the Silver Run Tunnel. In 1910, a train engineer got the shock of his life when he saw that there, stood in front of the tunnel they were about to go into, was a girl. She was described as having pitch black hair and bloodless skin. She was wearing a white dress and didn't seem to fear the train that was barreling towards her. At first he thought she must have been sleepwalking. He slammed the brakes on the train, but she didn't move. Then, just as the train was about to hit her, she screamed and jumped straight up into the air. When he asked the next station master about this, he told him not to worry, as several others had reported the exact same sight. A new engineer called O'Flannery didn't believe that this ghost was real. On his first run, he sped towards the tunnel. It was foggy and there was a full moon. He spotted the woman in white but kept on going. The ghost screamed and shot straight up. When he reached his first station, there was a crowd waiting. He asked what was going on and was told that as his train passed each station, people were trying to warn him that there was a girl riding the front of the train, her arms outstretched, and she was screaming. He found nothing on the front of his train and requested a transfer almost immediately. Some still report seeing her outside the tunnel even to this day. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Grey Flats Ghost. Locals in the town of Beckley will sometimes warn people before hiking the nearby Grey Flats Trail. It runs through ancient and eerie woods. Old farms pepper the outskirts, brambles and rotting oak trees mingle, and the canopy of leaves can snuff out any light trying to break through the darkness. Naturally, the trail has earned a reputation for hauntings. I found one story from a hiker that goes a little like this. It was nearly dusk in late October and it was cold and drizzly, and though that made seeing difficult, what we saw was plainly visible. At the point on the Grey Flats Trail where trees move in close, we saw a black figure in what might have been a long coat and a broad-rimmed hat. Though man-shaped, it had no obvious depth as no light fell upon it. It was completely black, and rather than moving like a person, it moved without walking, and it moved to the side, away from us, up through the trees, away from the road toward what might have been the farmhouse. And though the rocky ground rose, the figure did not. It appeared to move into the earth. As soon as it disappeared into the ground, my friend Becky began to get sick. She held her hands over her stomach and bent down and began to let out a kind of long sob. We asked her if she was alright, and she shook her head yes, that she just wanted to go home, so we grabbed her by the arms and went back out towards Ship Rock. Just as we were getting ready to turn onto the old farm trail, we looked back and saw the shape again. It appeared to be emerging from the ground and heading down toward where the old strip mines were. Very creepy story, their words, not mine. I'm definitely creeped out though. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Blennerhassett Hotel. This hotel in St. Parkersburg seemed normal from the outside, but everyone will tell you it's what goes on inside that's made it famous among ghost hunters. It was built by William Chancellor in the late 19th century. Over 100 years on from that, locals say it's haunted by the very man who built it. There are consistent reportings and documented happenings of hauntings there going back decades. Visitors say that several spirits actually haunt the old hotel, but William is probably the most well known. He appears as an old man in a 3-piece grey suit. They say his hair and beard are slicked back and that he sometimes wears a top hat and a cane. The spirit is said to look solid until he disappears in a puff of cigar smoke. Some of the other spirits include the children. These small child ghosts are said to play tag and hide and seek throughout the day and at night. Some of the staff report hearing whistlings as if someone was trying to get their attention, but they look up to find that nobody is there. The cooks in the kitchen say they feel tugging on their sleeves while they're trying to cook. I wonder if you can ever get used to a feeling like that. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Whipple Company Store. From 1890 to 1964, this building served as the company store for the local mine. Over the years though, it began to take on more responsibilities. At first, it became a meeting place for town events, then it hosted ballroom dances, and then it became an embalmer's. That's right, the town's dead were embalmed in the basement there, with bodies being stored until their funerals. With all of this energy, it's no surprise that many ghost hunters have been drawn to this building. There have been reports of people smelling coal dust or hearing strange whispering voices all over the building. There have even been a few apparitions of miners. It's a unique building because of how it's built. They say you can stand in the middle and hear everything that's happening in the whole building, even a whisper. So if you do visit, there's almost no way you're missing a ghostly apparition. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Greenbrier Ghost. Elva Zonna Heister was born in Greenbrier County sometime around 1873. Not much is really known about her early life, but her later life is very well documented. She married a wandering blacksmith by the name of Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe. That was actually going to be my name at one point. Anyway, the two were married for only a year when Elvis mysteriously died. Despite the local custom of letting the town's women clean and dress the corpse for the funeral, Erasmus insisted he do it all himself. Very strange. Rumors began to spread that he had killed his wife, but nobody could prove it. Then, one night, the ghost of Elva was said to appear by her mother's bedside to explain how she'd been murdered by her husband. Her mother took that information to the local prosecutor, who then dug up the body and proved that Elva had indeed been killed by her husband. The event is now enshrined in local history, the ghost that helped solve its own murder. We're jumping right into the deep end with our number 10, the Mothman. Let's go back to November 12th, 1966. 5 men were digging a grave at a cemetery in Clenadin when they claimed they saw a man-like figure fly out of the trees and over their heads. 3 days later, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant told police they saw a large creature with red glowing eyes in their car headlights. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. It was following them near an old World War II munitions plant. The legend of the Mothman was born. In the days after, more people reported seeing him. 2 firemen described it as a large bird with red eyes. About 90 miles away, a man from Salem said he saw a creature in the back of his barn with 2 red circle eyes like bicycle reflectors. For the next year, everyone was on edge, expecting to see the Mothman swooping down on them at any moment. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. Now, engineers blamed a defect in the suspension chain. Others said the Mothman sightings had something to do with it. As the years went by, experts tried to explain away all the different sightings, saying it was hallucinations or sleep paralysis. The Mothman story went cold for about 50 years. Then, in November 2016, WCHS TV published a photo from an anonymous man that people claimed was the Mothman. See for yourself what you make of this this famous urban legend picture. If you're excited to play the next Fallout game, it might not be that long till you meet the Mothman for yourself. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Snarly Yow. Some call this the Vanishing Dog, the Black Dog, or even the Dog Fiend. Whatever people in West Virginia call it though, this phantom dog has been seen by a lot of people. It's described as large, black, and teeth-bearing, appearing in front of people's cars on the dark mountain roads, but when they hit it and get out to check, the dog has disappeared into thin air. It was first sighted in the early 1800s, where it would chase people on horseback, in carriages, or donkey carts. It has continued this habit into modern times, only now it can be seen keeping pace with cars going at 55 miles per hour. If be told, locals don't really know how fast this thing can actually go. Although many people have reported seeing the creature, it has never actually harmed anyone as of yet. This kind of unnerves some people though, who worry, what does it really want from the people it terrorizes? Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Sheepsquatch. This one is also known as the White Creature, a monster said to roam the Kanawha Valley. It's been described as a bear with the shape of a dog, if you can imagine that. It has huge saber-like fangs. Its wool is a dirty white colour, hence the sheep part of its name. Despite its lumbering appearance, the creature is fast, moving at lightning speed. Perhaps what's most creepy is its tendency to switch from 4 legs to 2 when it moves, making it seem very human-like. Their screams in the night have been compared to the sound of someone being murdered. Then there are the attacks. Here's where things get really weird. People always say that the creature jumps on them like a wolf, sinking its teeth right into their flesh, making them howl out in pain, but then when the attack is over, they look down to find there is not a single mark on their body. That's better news than an actual mortal wound, I guess, but most people who have seen the Sheepsquatch hope to never again. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Flatwoods Monster. Some also call this the Green Monster or the Phantom of Flatwoods. The legend of it began in 1952 after a group of children claimed they saw a UFO crash behind a hill not far from the town. They went out and told Kathleen May, a local hairdresser, who came with them to inspect the crash site. From the top of the hill, they saw a pulsing red light. Then their flashlights landed on what they described as a man-like figure with a round red face surrounded by a pointed hood-like shape. They said he was 10 foot tall. His eyes emitted greenish orange light. His body was dark green in colour. Kathleen May said it had small claw-like hands and a head that resembled the ace of spades. According to the group, it made a hissing sound as it approached them. One of the kids dropped the flashlight in fear and they all fled the scene. Some have said the sighting was nothing more than a common barn owl, but many in the town believe it to be true. Even the welcome sign says Flatwoods is the home of the Green Monster. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Grafton Monster. As the name might suggest, this comes from the old railroad town of Grafton. There may not be room for a mysterious creature among the many buildings and houses there, but the place is surrounded by dense woodland, and that's where locals say the Grafton Monster lurks. Ever since the 1960s, people have reported seeing a man-like creature resembling Bigfoot or the skunk ape. They say it stands between 7 and 9 feet tall and is cloaked in pale skin that is slick to the touch, kind of like a seal or dolphins. Local farmers report it the most, saying it tears down their fences and strips their trees of fruit. Those who have got close enough described it as being able to run extremely fast and having a foul odour. Perhaps the strangest description, although rarer than the rest, is that the Grafton Monster is headless. Others say witnesses are mistaken and it only appears headless because it tucks its head low to its chest. Some say you'll know it's near when it lets out a low whistle through the trees. Next up now at number 5, we have the Bunny Man. This one sounds cute, right? You guys might have thought we were taking a quick break from scary halfway through the video. Oh no! It's just getting worse. The Bunny Man legend began with 2 incidents in Fairfax County in 1970. The first came from Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée. On October 9th, the couple were returning from a football game around midnight. They parked up to visit a relative when out of nowhere, a figure ran up to the back of their car and smashed the front passenger window in. They looked up to see a man in a white suit with long bunny ears. The Bunny Man screamed that they were on private property and trespassing. The couple sped away and later found a hatchet that was used to smash the window on the floor of their car. 10 days later, a construction man called Paul Phillips was on the same road. He approached a man standing on the porch of an unfinished home. He described him as wearing a grey, black and white bunny costume. The Bunny Man began chopping at a porch post with a long-handled axe, saying, "All you people trespass around here. If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head." The police investigation was closed due to the lack of evidence, but more than 50 other people people came forward claiming to have seen the bunny man, many of them on that same stretch of road. Even to this day, locals have reported seeing freshly skinned rabbit carcasses hanging from the overpass of what is now known as Bunny Man Bridge, a sure sign that this axe-wielding fiend is nearby, waiting to bust you on the head. Next up at number 4 now, we have Mammy Thurman. On June 22nd, 1931, the body of a young woman was found slain near the town of Rogan. Her neck was broken, her throat cut from ear to ear, and she had been shot twice in the head at close range. The motive or culprit was a complete mystery. The whole town was shocked. A local handyman was convicted of the crime, but there was still a lot of questions. Her death certificate states that she was buried in Logan Memorial Park, but her funeral home records said her body was transported to Kentucky. However, the cemetery in Kentucky has no record of her interment. One night after her funeral, it was also said that a local businessman paid $1,000 to move her body to a different location altogether. To this day, it remains a mystery where exactly she was buried. According to local folklore, many claim that her ghost now wanders the hills, searching for the person who took her life, as the handyman was not to blame. Others said she waits on that same road, waiting for justice. Many have seen her there, saying she hitchhikes with truck drivers only to vanish into thin air. People who park on the hill say they felt her push the car up. Nice, but no thanks. Next up, number 3 now, we have Screaming Jenny. The story goes like this. Along some railroads in West Virginia, there were some abandoned old storage sheds. The poor had moved in there to escape the harsh winters. A sweet woman called Jenny lived there. She had fallen on hard times, never had enough to eat, and the small fires barely kept her alive. Still, she did everything she could to help those around her. On one cold autumn evening, she sat shivering over her fire when a spark flew out and lit her wool skirt on fire. She was so busy eating her broth that she didn't notice until the fire began to scorch right down to her skin. She leapt up and threw the broth all over herself, but that didn't stop the fire. She began screaming along the tracks, begging for help as the flames engulfed her whole body. She ran for the nearby train station, hoping someone there could help, but by now she was a glowing inferno, a ball of fire that looked barely human. In her pain and confusion, she didn't see the train rounding the curve ahead of her. Her scream stopped as the train mowed her down. The station crew found her dead, still burning. They put her out, gave her a funeral, and buried Jenny in the local graveyard. She was quickly forgotten. Then, a month later, another train was rounding the curve on the tracks when it hit another screaming ball of fire. The crew expected to see another mangled body burning, but this time there was nothing there. It's been that way ever since. Train drivers in the area say they still see Screaming Jenny, especially on the anniversary of her death. It seems she's locked in an eternal loop, still desperate for the help she needed in her final moments. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Ugua. Quite simply, the Ugua is a river monster. It's said to lurk in the waters of the Monongahela River in Marion County. Its legend goes back to Native American tribes who lived along the riverbanks there many years ago. It's said to be a serpentine creature of up to 500 pounds in weight, with a reddish brown colour and deadly razor sharp teeth. It's also amphibious and has been known to clamber onto land if it needs to. It stays hidden in the waters during the day, coming onto land at night to hunt for prey. Apparently it even hunts deer. Yeah, fully grown deer. It waits along their paths and then thrashes them into submission with its tail before dragging them into the river to devour. Of course, if it can bring down a deer, it wouldn't have much trouble with a human. Some people don't even go near the places where it's sighted, at least not alone. And finally, number 1 now, we have Droop Mountain. On this mountain, there was once a very fierce battle during the American Civil War. Many lost their lives, and the blood spilled that day is said to have soaked into the very mountain itself, changing it forever. They say the cries of war still linger on Droop Mountain, forever lost in time. Visitors have reported that something just feels off when you're up there. At night, there is no mistaking it at all. One woman who was raised beside the mountain reported seeing a man standing up on the old battlefield. His body glowed in the darkness, and to her astonishment, he had no head. Whenever they shone a light on him, he disappeared. Another time, the woman was walking with her husband and cousins when the whole group stopped in their tracks. Up there again on the old battlefield was a transparent soldier on his horse. The soldier seemed to notice them before turning away and vanishing into the trees. Even skeptics have reported seeing the figure of a headless man drifting along. Those who have got close say he is wearing a Confederate uniform. Now others say his head isn't actually missing, it's just been shot off. To be honest, I'm not really sure which one of those is scarier. But either way, I don't think I'd head up Droop Mountain at night by myself.